everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Family Business, where I'm happy to introduce Mika Nishimura. Mika's been a contact of mine for many years and have grown to respect and find no end to interest in her life and her stories. And I thought for sure she'd be a great guest here. So Mika, thanks so much for joining the show.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Matt. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to letting everyone hear what I already know and then maybe picking up something new along the way. Could you take the first minute and just kind of give a snapshot of, who you are and what you're doing now or most recently so people can get some context of what you're into?
Yeah, sure. So like many of the people who come on this show, I've been in the medtech industry for many years now. I started in a very typical fashion with a larger company. It was Guidant. At that point, it was before actually it was Guidant. And to tell you the truth, the first day of my job I was told you have to get on the plane to go to Switzerland to a ski resort called Zermatt. And your job, since you don't know anything about cardiology, is to ski with the distributors. So that was a really awesome start.
Are you kidding me?
Career.
That was your first day?
That was my first day, my very first day, sitting in the business class of Swiss Air.
Had you ever been in business class before?
I had, but only as a guest of my father. So it was quite a treat. And the Swiss soccer team was with us, and there were a bunch of good-looking young men. So.
Jesus, talk about a story. You didn't even need a salary at that point. Just said, look, I'll just hang out.
Yeah. So I started off on the right footing, and I loved the industry ever since then. But the first several years, Guidant, and as fun as it was, in '99, decided to leave. And this is another story. So ostensibly because my husband suggested that we move to Austin, Texas. So I quit Guidant, cashed out my stock options. We had a year-old baby at the time. We put our house on the market here, looking for a house to buy in Austin. And then 3 months later, my husband turns around and he says, "Sweetie, love of my life, we should have moved to Austin, Texas." So
it's great.
We're still married, by the way.
Barely.
And that 1-year-old child is now at law school. But so then I went to my consulting routes. And that's kind of when I started to really work with earlier stage companies. Some of them then turned out not to be, so little. But that started my second phase of my medtech career, really working with privately held companies, helping them grow, find money, sit on the other side of the table as a venture investor, board member. So it's taken me to a lot of different places, but I've enjoyed every single step of it.
I'll tell you, your reputation follows you, like a wake. And I don't know anyone who doesn't have a kind word to say about Mika. And for some reason, you've been able to weather that because, that's a tough business to be in. I'm curious because I know your personality a fair amount, but certainly not. I've never seen you at the negotiating table, or I've never seen you when things get tight. So I'm curious because you seem like such a good-natured, even-keeled person. What happens when Mika loses her temper?
My husband knows it intimately.
Yeah.
And my kids also know when to sort of back up slowly and go back to their rooms when that happens. In a business setting, it has been very rare for me to lose my temper. There have certainly been times when I tense up, I need to get up, I need to walk away and come back. But, one thing that's kind of guided me in all of this is that we work in such a small industry where, Matt, everybody in this industry, right? And it seems like even if I don't know a person, we're only 1 degree, 2 degrees of separation from anybody. And as you said, reputation is so important because you just never know if you're going to be working with that person again in a completely different capacity. So my mantra has always been never, ever burn bridges. You can have tough negotiations, you can disagree on things, but as long as you do it in a professional way that doesn't attack the other person's personality, and it's just a business disagreement, I think, you can keep everything intact and you can shake hands again and be cordial to one another again. So that's worked for me, and I'm glad that I still have a lot of friends with whom I have had disagreements.
So, because I know you have two older daughters, I'm curious if they're the same as you, or there's a little more fire there, and they don't have as much restraint as you have.
I have two girls who are really different in personalities. So, as I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, my older one is first year law student. And for those friends who have known her since she was a toddler, they kind of all nod and say, like, yep, that's absolutely the right profession for her. And in fact, she will never be a corporate lawyer. She'll be a litigator because she has loved to argue and litigate anything since she was in preschool. So she can find points of contention with everything. And she is not shy about voicing her opinion. So she's really different from me. And she's also really different from our younger daughter, who is, I've never heard anybody speak ill of her. She has never created enemies. She has managed to sail through the teenage years when girls can get nasty to one another, and she has just managed to stay above the fray. But one of the things that she struggles with is kind of picking a strong position and really advocating for yourself. So it's really different between the two.
That's an interesting give and take. Sounds like they should go into business together. Do they get along?
They do get along better now. There were definitely times when there were your usual sibling conflicts, and in fact, just like about a year ago, my younger daughter confessed to me that at one point when she was young, she actually did prepare to run away from home because she couldn't stand her older sister bullying her and saying nasty things and having fights. So, having watched some cartoons, she knew that kid who runs away from home needs to gather up her stuff and put it at the end of a stick. So she gathered like
so
her
great.
stuffies and her books and everything into a blanket, her favorite blanket, and tied it to the end of a stick. And she walked out of the house and went about like 500 feet apparently before she kind of realized like, this is nuts. I shouldn't really kind of go through with this. So she turned around and came home. I never knew this.
She never knew, you didn't know she even left in the first place?
She never told me about this. She was in college.
It's a very brief runaway. That's too funny. Did the older one watch her go and just wave?
I have no idea.
I never ran away from home. No, nor did my brother or my sister that I can recall. I don't think so. Did you?
Yeah, no, I never ran away from home either.
Yeah, I don't think so. I was too hungry. I wasn't able to do that. I just followed my stomach wherever it went. So with all of the career decisions you've made, and there's been several, how many times did it come down to, okay, I have these two girls, or I need to take into account what my husband's career is going, or anything else that's going on in your life family-wise? How many times was that part of the deciding factor?
Yeah, for sure. We have had those types of decision points. And in fact, even while I was at Guidance, so in the 90s, I was told that for me to move up in the organization, like a big organization like Guidance, that I should be prepared to move and take different assignments, sometimes in international markets or in other cities, be a rep, carry a bag, all those things were suggested to me. And then at the same time, my husband was also getting the same advice from his employer, which at the time was ADP, that big payroll processing company. Not that he worked on that side of the business in a completely different division, but he was told that, look, for you to move up, and we see a great promise for you, that you need to move and take on different positions. So we're both facing that pressure from our employers. And what we agreed to do was, okay, let's kind of look at it longitudinally. And there will be some times when it's, one of us, should pursue that while the other potentially sort of closes a door to something that could have led somewhere. So my husband, for example, decided to take this Minneapolis position, and I was still a guidance. We talked about whether I should potentially move to the CRM division of guidance out of St. Paul office and work out of there. In the end, what happened was he moved for a couple of years, commuted between San Francisco and Minneapolis, and I stayed back, partially because he tried to sell me this concept of moving to Minneapolis when it was minus 56
Yeah,
degrees.
I was gonna say
That was not a good.
no.
That was not a good move. And similar thing when he was offered a position in Zurich, but we decided to turn it down because I had a position that I loved, and we just couldn't think about moving to Zurich at that point. But I did, in the end, decide to leave Guidon partially, because of this potential move to Austin, Texas, but also because at that point, our older one was just a year old. I felt like it was a good time to maybe take a stop and step back and think about my career and where I wanted to go. So even without this Austin impetus, I might have decided to leave guidance at that point, as great as guidance was. So I decided to try the full-time mom thing.
How'd that work out?
And so I left guidance in May. And then in August, I was crawling up the wall.
I would think so.
So I reached back out to a dear friend who was the head of the Guidance Compass Group, the corporate strategy and the venture arm. I said, Nikki, please rescue me. And he did. He reached out and hired me as a consultant. And so I was able to kind of make it all work. But then, there were definitely trade-offs when my husband then also decided at a certain point that he wanted to also take a break from corporate life and a really busy startup life. So when it so happened that he sold his software company at the end of 2006, I resigned from EV3 after running their emerging markets group for 4 years. We both actually decided to take a sabbatical, a self-funded sabbatical, when we lived in Italy for 6 months. And upon returning from that,
Where in Italy were you?
In Lake Como, which was a beautiful place.
For 6 months, you just there? So I spent my honeymoon there, and I haven't been back since. But I've always felt that certain parts of Italy, they're never in a hurry anywhere. Like the biggest decision of the day was lunch.
Yes, big decision.
So for 6 months, you just kind of hung out?
We hung out there. Our girls, one of the reasons that we chose Como was because they had a small international school, and they had spots for girls who were in 2nd grade and 4th grade at that point. But it was a fantastic adventure. And the only regret that we had was that we didn't do it for a 4 year. Which was my husband's suggestion. The female part of the household said, no, we have friends back here and we want to, not commit to a year. And 3 weeks into it was like, can we extend the lease? Can we extend the school? And it just turned out to be too difficult to do that. So we had a fantastic time. We traveled all over the place in Italy. I learned a little bit of Italian. And the girls, could order gelato in Italian. That was about it. And it was a wonderful family experience for us. Time to kind of gel together in a very different environment. So,
I didn't know you did that. Yeah, I every now and again when I get my most stressed, I go to Positano in my mind. It's the most serene place I've ever been, and everybody there just hangs out. Did you ever make it over there?
Yeah, we made it over there. That was actually one of the memorable trips that we took because we did Positano and the whole Amalfi Coast. We went to Capri, but we also did Pompeii. And at that point, my 4th grader was really into Greek and Roman mythology. So she was having a field day with our private guide, who was taking us around, who was an archaeologist by training. And so the two of them just kind of would go off and explore all the places and talk about mythology. And so it was, yeah, it's wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. My kids had a similar experience. They were, I don't know what it was, but they were way into it at the same time. And they took a tour at the Louvre. And this one woman, she was young, she was an archaeology student.
Mm-hmm.
And when she found out that my kids knew, most of the Greek gods and knew the things, so she just took them by the hands and took off and just ran through the Louvre, like showing them everything. Yeah. And it's amazing, what would happen if the kids engage in the vacation or in the trip, like anything can happen. And that's interesting. Did the younger one have an interest as well, or was it just your older one?
Just the older one at that point. My younger one was, I think, too young to really appreciate it. Although a year later, she got into Egyptian mythology.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've noticed about a pattern with you and your family is education. The level is at as high as you can imagine worldwide. So I'm curious, when you were growing up, was that always the goal or the plan that you were going to come here to the States and go to school at such an elite level, or what were your thoughts when you were in high school yourself?
Yeah. Going to a U.S. university wasn't really part of the plan. My father worked for a large Japanese trading company, Sumitomo, and so he got transferred a couple times to the U.S. So I spent 3 years as a child, a very young child, in San Francisco, went back to Japan, and then came out when I was in high school to New York. So the U.S. kind of came into the picture a little bit late in my school life. But both of my parents were very well educated. And my dad was actually born in a countryside of Japan near Osaka. His parents were farmers, basically. And my grandmother, however, got educated as a teacher. And I remember many years ago, I had one afternoon with her all to myself. I was babysitting her while the rest of the family went to a family wedding. And my grandmother, who was in her 90s at that point, was telling me about her hopes and dreams that she had when she was training to be a teacher, and how she really wanted to study English and go farther, than just getting a teaching credential. So education was extremely important to both my parents. So when my dad and my mom got married, and they ended up having 3 girls. And my dad is of that generation. He's now in his mid 80s. So a lot of my friends had very conservative dads who would encourage the girls to just kind of, get married to a nice, man with a stable job, and, that's kind of your lot in life. Whereas when he realized that he was not going to have a son and just 3 girls, Dad said, okay, I'm going to invest in your education because I see that as my social security. So you better.
I like this guy already.
You better take advantage of that. So he did encourage us to go as high as we could. He financed our undergraduate education, but professional degree was up to us to pursue it. In fact, he gave me a loan because I couldn't get a U.S. loan as a foreign resident for business school. So I went to him and said, look, Dad, I saved half of my business school anticipated expense, but I need help with the rest of that. And he said, okay, we can formalize a loan agreement between you and me. Here's the repayment schedule. And I'm going to charge you a friends and family rate of 9.5% interest rate per annum.
He's the best.
Because this is a deep discount to the stock market return I can get in the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Mind you, this was mid-80s.
Yeah.
So before I graduated, of course, the Tokyo stock market had crashed. His portfolio got wiped out to a large degree, and the loan that he had, with me, which I paid back, returned the best return on investment. So,
that's awesome. Did your 2 sisters take him up on the education as well?
Yeah. So my older sister, actually, she accuses me of just copying her. So she went to Barnard College undergraduate, went back to Japan, And then she graduated from Harvard Business School 2 years before I did. So we sort of didn't quite overlap, but we were in Boston at the same time. And my younger sister, who returned to Japan with my parents, is the darling of the family because she ended up at his alma mater, which is Tokyo University. So she is the favorite child.
She has brown nose.
Yeah.
We can say it. We all know.
Yeah.
That's funny. So does any of your family live in the Bay Area or are you? No?
No, I'm the only one. My younger sister is now, so she became a commercial architect. And she's heading up a joint venture between a Japanese big design firm and Australian joint venture partner. So she has lived in Melbourne, Australia for now 4.5 years or so. And my older sister lives in Tokyo, not too far away from my parents. So we're kind of spread in 3 countries. And then on my husband's side, he's a Sydney boy. So
he's Australian?
Is all in Australia. Yeah.
I didn't know that he was Aussie. See, I'm always learning something. I didn't know. So how'd you meet him?
At business school.
Okay.
So we met in business school, and then both of us came out to the West Coast. I made a pit stop in LA before we got married in '91 in San Francisco.
Huh. I tell you, Mika, you've lived. You absolutely have lived. So talk to me a bit about some of the things that have been going on later in your career, because I think consulting is a very misunderstood concept within corporate, because there are some people who are just so traditional in their thinking that, well, you have a job, you work there full time, and if you want to change jobs, you go to another job, and it's very linear. But consulting is anything but linear. So could you give me some insight on first of all, why you decided to go consulting and what you've done with it? Because you've turned it into quite an art.
Yeah. So first of all, I started my professional career as a consultant because like many people who graduate from college, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I went to work at Bain & Company in the Boston headquarters office after doing a little stint in Tokyo office. So I did that for a couple of years and then went to business school, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I went to work for LAK for a couple of years in LA. So I had done strategy consulting before. So when in '99 we decided, okay, I'll resign from Guidant, and my husband's commuting to Austin, Texas at that point. And I was growing up the wall, being a full-time mom. It was sort of somewhat natural move for me to go back into consulting, but as an independent consultant and doing business development and venture investing and corporate strategy for Guidant was a sort of natural thing for me to do. But then it sort of evolved into, okay, using my operational background and the commercial experience that I had to help earlier stage companies. But as you said, Matt, it's been a bit of a fluid thing because what tended to happen was I would start as a consultant for a discrete project, and then it was sort of morph into something more full-time and longer-term relationships. So that's actually what happened at both Novos, which was a radiotherapy company, and also EV3. I first became a consultant to EV3 because they asked me to put together a emerging markets commercial plan. And I presented it. The management team loved it and said, "We love it so much. Can you actually join the company and do it?" And it's like, no, thank you. Yeah, I don't want to commute to Minneapolis. I don't want to commute to Irvine, California. I like my consulting lifestyle, so thank you for the offer, but no, thank you. And Jim Corbett wore me down over a period of about 6 months. And he finally twisted my arm and bent over backwards to accommodate my demands. So I actually ended up being a long-term, full-time consultant for EV3, but with a title and people reporting to me and signing authorities and all that sort of thing, until the general counsel came around and said, "We can't do this anymore."
So I gotta play a little geography. Do you know Brett Wall?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Brett's one of my favorites, and I feel, yeah, Yeah, he's really something else, that guy,
Oh yeah.
and I figured you guys would connect. He's a lover of
Hmm.
wine. We every now and again have had a couple of glasses together, and
Hmm.
he's got his own winery that he's
Yeah,
starting up.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
our business is small. So with that though, did you ever have this pull to go back to
Mhm,
something full time? Now that your kids are getting older, they're more self
mhm,
sufficient.
mhm.
Was that the feeling, or did you settle into consulting and said, "Look, this is more what makes me feel fulfilled, happy, whatever term you want to use"? Like, how
Mhm.
does that work from you as far as the decisions you made in the last several years?
Yeah. So, as you said, Matt, it's a fluid thing, right? Your family circumstances change, your kids grow up, your partner, spouse's situation changes and all that. So, when young people come to me and say, I need career advice from you. I need you to mentor me because I'm trying to think about my next 10 years and want to lay out this roadmap. It's like, hold on. I can look back and say that I had this 25-year strategic roadmap for my career and I executed it flawlessly. I can make that story up, and there will be some incredible moments in there, but a lot of the decisions that I have made along the way were really going with the flow and somewhat trusting your instincts or what feels right, for you at the time, and sometimes taking a leap, right? So it happened a couple of times. So about in 2010, so about 10 years ago now, I was approached by one of my former colleagues, client, who sat on the board of this company, that I want you to go and talk to the CEO. And just like, I have no interest in going back to work full time. Thanks, so much for thinking about me. No, just go and talk this company. So through an introductory sort of consulting project that turned into a full-time job. So that was Oxygen, which was in the infertility
Hmm.
technology space. And loved that space and the company. And it was a really fun experience. My first foray into women's health. And from there, I ended up jumping into another full-time position. Again, started doing a consulting project, and then that morphed into a full-time position, and that was in Vision Medical, which then ended up getting acquired by Boston a couple years in. So I ended up then staying at Boston for 2 years full-time, and just left the organization about half a year ago. So those were not planned things. I wasn't looking to make that move. But when something kind of special comes along and really speaks to you, and for me, things have to speak to me at an emotional level as well as the analytical and intellectual side of things, and it just felt like the right things to do at that point, and it ended up working. So.
So the one thing that I haven't heard you say is, do you ever turn to your family and say, "What do you guys think?" Or were these decisions all unilateral?
My husband's always a great sounding board for me. And even though he's in a completely different industry, he's in a clean tech,
Hmm.
and we never sort of understand each other's industries at kind of anywhere in depth. But he's a wonderful life coach and a career coach for me in terms of thinking through whether this is the right thing or not. And he's always very supportive of whatever decision that I would make, and vice versa. So he actually retired for a few years after Italy.
Hmm.
He said that he wanted to not be in the rat race anymore. He had a good exit. We had a wonderful time in Italy. The girls were pretty young, and he wanted to spend time with them. So, and that was when I was kind of running around mad. So it worked out that he would stay home, and I was free to kind of travel and do things that I wanted to do.
Sounds like a good fit. All right. So I've always wanted to ask you this question. I've known a lot of hockey moms. I've known a ton of soccer moms. I don't know any fencing moms except you. So what happens when you're up in the stands? Just so you guys know what we're talking about. Mika's youngest daughter is an excellent fencer, not sort of good. And Mika's been to a fair amount of meets, tournaments. What do they call it?
Yeah.
So what is that like? Some other kid is hitting your kid with a stick. Like what's going through your head at that point?
Um, Fencing is not good for your heart as a spectator, as a mom, as a parent. It's just heart thumpingly hard. It's really intense. It's short period. Each bout, it's called bout, will last 3 minutes for the round robin, and then for elimination round altogether 9 minutes. Those are the kind of, not elapsed time, but the actual sort of start and stop minutes. And it's one-on-one, right? So it's not a team event, where you can kind of have the team cheering on, and you have the moms and the dads in the stands, like all cheering for the team. It's one-on-one. And my daughter is a really good fencer. She was on the national team for Australia. She went to World Cups and World Championships and all that, but she would, invariably, always somewhere along the tournament, lose, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of, and she takes those things really hard. It's hard to talk to her afterwards. And I try not to be the sideline mom or the coach. So zip my mouth. Sometimes I'm not even allowed to be in her line of sight. Like, Mom, I can see you wince. It's like, you should be paying attention to your opponent and not to my facial expressions. But it's a pretty intense thing. So it's not what I think it's hard.
So I'm trying to imagine you yelling at a referee. I don't really think that's your personality, but has there ever been where you had to be escorted out or anything where your behavior got the best of you?
No, but there have been times that my husband would gently place his hand on me as I'm just kind of tensing up. Take a deep breath, sweetie. Um, so yes, no, I never yelled at refs. I never yelled at coaches or fellow, parents or anything like that. Our coach would yell at the refs all the time. It is done a lot in fencing. It's not unusual behavior, but yeah, my job was to just it.
Is she still competing in college or is she done?
No, she is competing in college. She loves college fencing, which is a little bit more of a team sport, actually, because you kind of tally up everybody's results, and it's the team total that really counts. So a lot less pressure than the one-on-ones when she was competing internationally. So she loves it. She loves the team camaraderie. It's a good outlet. Unfortunately, the whole season was scrapped, like everybody else's, but she's hoping that in the spring that they'll be allowed to train again.
And to make sure I share the love, your other daughter was involved with Interpol and some international law, and I mean everybody. Mika's daughters don't waste time. What was that story? Because I didn't know what she was doing. I remember you explaining something to me at some point about Interpol.
Yeah. So my older one has always really been interested in international justice, international policy. So even though she's going to law school, her interest is really in the international criminal justice side of things. So her dream job will be to go to The Hague and work there, but there will be many steps before that. But that's her aspiration. I mean, she's been one of these kids that I remember when she was in 5th grade. She started to really become interested in learning about foreign conflicts and policies. And so when she was 14, she went and traveled around the Balkan Peninsula to visited Kosovo, Bosnia, Serbia, all just trying to see what the aftermath of that whole conflict is now, and what are the long-lasting, impact that conflict has on the internal politics and the economy and whatnot. So she was with a small group of people doing this. She went to Italy during the whole immigration, the migrant crisis. She studied the Cyprus conflict. She was supposed to go to Israel, but then bombs started flying, so that trip got canceled. So she's kind of been really a nut about this, and that's really where her passion is. So she's in the right area to be pursuing this, and so I applaud that she has really stuck to her guns right now and said, like, I'm not interested in going into big private law practice, and I want to pursue public interest law. So good for her.
Yeah, I mean, you and your husband have done something right, because to find kids to excel at something that's kind of unique. It's not like it's easy to excel at those things. Most kids can pick up a piano or play soccer or do something that's prevalent. I mean, yeah. I don't know how many fencing studios there are, or how many international law trips to Kosovo there are for 14-year-olds. Yeah. I don't know how you even found that.
Yeah, no, we were very fortunate. Our kids do appreciate the fact that we were able to financially support them in these endeavors. And fencing is not a cheap sport.
I wouldn't think so.
Every month you're flying somewhere international or across the country for these tournaments, and it's commitment. And there was actually a recent article in the Atlantic about these elite private sports, whether it's fencing or crew or lacrosse or squash, about how the elite in the coast have figured out that this may give their kids a leg up in college admissions. And there were, in fact, some college admission scandals involving Harvard fencing. And so a friend of ours reached out to us and said, like, hey, what do you think about this whole thing? And do you feel differently about your daughter pursuing this fencing? And that did result in her getting recruited to a really good school. Our response to that was, it was really, for us, it was never the end goal to get her into an elite school. That came as a great side benefit. And we're certainly happy that worked for her, but it was really the journey that we thought was really valuable, that she learned to overcome disappointments frequently, and pick herself right back up and keep at it, and just the sticking to it, the perseverance, the discipline, the time management that it required on her part, and just being resilient, and for us, just time to bond together on these trips to Cleveland, Ohio in middle February for the U.S. Nationals, or the 7th trip to Poland for the training camp, or whatever it is.
I just think that those types of experiences for kids are irreplaceable, and there's no cost attached to it, because it's priceless. And in the way that she probably conducts herself from a maturity standpoint and from her ability to grasp things is only going to accelerate her career and accelerate her growth and accelerate her ability to understand how to take on all this responsibility. And then when she has a family, she'll be able to encourage her kids, hey, look, my parents backed me on this crazy adventure that I went on, and I'm open to backing you whenever you want to do. You guys should write a book, because I mean, to have two kids to be so diverse and to be so unique in their approach to something that most people don't even know anything about. Right. Yet here they are making, their lives about it. Now, obviously, she's not going to be a professional fencer. I don't even know if there is such a thing.
Very, very, very few people do it at the professional level. But yeah, no, I mean, she'll probably hang up her foils after the senior year next year. She doesn't really, see herself continue to sort of train at that level. Mm-hmm. But no, I mean, she really enjoyed and valued the whole experience. And as you said, I think it's really going to serve her well as she progresses in her career after school.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite a role model, and your husband seems like a sensational guy, and it's only filtering down. Well, look, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being on this show. You're exactly what I would love for people to hear on what it's like to raise a family and have your career, and how up and down it all is, and how hard it is to balance it. And like you said best, most of it's not planned. It's kind of messy, and that's just the way that it goes, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
And most of the time things work out, right? It worked
Well,
out for us.
they
And
work out because people like you make them work out. You know, that part you can't get around. But at the end of the day, it also is that things kind of fall into place. I remember getting some advice when my kids were very young, like 2, 3, 4. And I had a buddy who had an older kids, and he goes, "Look, trust me when I tell you, by kindergarten, they all get to the same place. Don't worry about potty training. Don't worry about talking, walking." And that was the best advice I ever got as a new parent, because by kindergarten, every kid was doing the same. And I'm like, I was worried about nothing. It was fine. And
yeah,
it's the same mentality. Well, look, thank you again for being a part of this. This has been The Family Business, where family is what binds us. This has been Mika Nishimura. Definitely watch the whole conversation. She is a trip. Mika, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. Talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.